Wife Material Podcast. Women's standards are wrong. The thing is, not really wrong per se. It's the idea that it's like, everybody should have standards, right? Should have things that, that has to do with what they want. But what you want should be obtainable, should be logical, right? Should be reasonable. It should, it's understandable if you, like, the idea of women, a lot of women out here want guys who are 6 feet tall, but not every guy is 6 feet tall. 6 feet is not the average height for men, so let's say the average height is 5'7", so it's between 5'7" and 6 feet. So it's in that range that men's height tends to vary. And if you're a woman that's under 5'7", let's say you're 5'5" or even 5 feet tall, any man who's taller than you by 1 or 2 inches is tall. Logically, they're taller than you already. Around you, you're gonna feel small around them anyway, right? So that's why wanting a guy to be a whole entire foot taller than you is unnecessary. You just need him to be, just a little bit taller than you, so that way he can reach for things for you. Because a guy doesn't have to be 6 feet tall to reach for something. You gotta take into account arm length, right? A guy who's 5'7", 5'8" can reach something up high that a guy who's 7 feet tall can reach, right? A guy who's 7 feet, did I say 7 feet? I meant 6 feet. 6 feet tall. A guy who's 6 feet tall, he doesn't have to raise his arms that much. He just has to raise it high enough for to reach his face, because the item he's reaching for is at eye level, and he just brings his hands up to his face and then reaches out and grabs the thing. A guy who's shorter than that, well, he'll be reaching his arms above his head, but he can still reach that thing. So if the thing that y'all like about guys being tall is that they can reach for things that you can't reach because you can't, reach that high, any guy that's taller than you, even by a couple inches, already is going to be able to reach for things that you can't reach for. So that's why being very specific on wanting a guy who's 6 feet, it's just not logical. But, hey, your standards, right? So make sure that every guy you mess with and every guy you end up getting pregnant by, which should only be one guy, but that's for a different conversation, that you should, you should not mess around with any other guy that doesn't meet that standards. Because the point of a standard is that that's what you accept. You accept nothing but the best, right? So your standard's supposed to be the best. That's why it's ironic when you have women who talk about their standards, and even when they do meet a guy that meets their standards, it's ironic that it never seems to work out. Yet they still keep that standard. They get the perfect guy, right? The great guy, yet it never seems to work out. And of course, typically they blame the guy for that. But it's like, but he met your standards, so it can't be him. He met your standards. Maybe your standards are wrong, which is why I say standards are wrong. Because maybe your standards are wrong. Maybe your standards need to be based off of other things that will work in a relationship, that will make it where the guy would still be with you, as opposed to, meeting all your criteria, all the things you want to get in a relationship with. Because the thing that's ironic is that most women's standards is just based off of the idea that you'll talk to the guy, not that you'll live happily ever after with him, not that you'll spend the rest of your life with him, not that you'll follow his lead, for example, that you want to be part of his life, as opposed to try to convince him that he needs to be part of your life, type of stuff. It's like your standards, should make sense, but most women's standards don't make sense. But hey, they're your standards, right? You do you. You accept the consequences, because by having really high standards, as some women like to say, that means you're reducing your options. You're reducing the type of guys you can be with. You'd think that would be a good thing, that, oh yeah, you're reducing it down to a few guys so that way they're the best guys. So whichever guy you pick will be perfect, right? But no one's perfect, so why would you even try to whittle things down to that point where just one choice would be the perfect choice? It's like, nah. You want multiple options, so that way you have a better chance of finding out what fits you, right? What works best for you. Because what works best for you is more likely a guy who doesn't meet none of your standards. Let's say your standards is 6 feet, 6 figures, 6-pack. But the perfect guy for you meets none of those standards. The perfect guy for you is a 5-figure earner, a guy who has a beer belly, or just doesn't have to be beer belly, just doesn't have abs. He has a flat stomach but no abs, right? And then he's 5'8", 2 inches, right? No, 4 inches, 4 inches short of being 6 feet. That's it, just 4 inches short of being 6 feet. He's still tall. And let's say you're a 5-foot woman, he's 8 inches taller than you. Like, that's super tall compared to your height, because you're super short. So, you know, every guy is taller. Is a tall guy. So every guy should be your standard, right? Because they're tall. As long as a guy is taller than you, that should be your standard. That's a much more logical standard, because then that means you have more options. That means you have more chances of finding the perfect guy for you. And the idea is you're trying to find the perfect guy for you, a guy who you get along with, you know, you have a lot of great memories with, more than the bad memories. Obviously, you want good memories to outweigh the bad, right? And you know, just the ideal situation should be someone that at first doesn't look like they're the right guy, but they turn out to be the right guy. That's the ideal scenario. That's what you're supposed to be looking for. That the right guy for you is a guy that at first doesn't look like the right guy for you, but it turns out he is. You also want the guy that most other women don't want, right? Because they're, you know, with their high standards, they don't even see this guy. You should want the guy that doesn't meet the average women, you know, standards, because it's more likely he's going to be a great guy. More likely. I'm not saying guaranteed, just more likely he's going to be a great guy compared to guys who do meet the standards. Because guys who meet the standards are so unique and rare to meet all three of those standards, 6 figures, 6-pack, and 6 feet, that, you know, their lifestyle is so different and so unique that there's a high probability that you don't meet their standards, because their standards are totally different because of how different their life was, how different they were treated in life. So, you know, what we typically see, guys that tend to meet most of the women's standards tend to be the guy that she has the most issues with, that she complains about the most, where the heartbreak happens often comes from those guys, the guys who do meet her standards, right? So that's why, you know, women's standards, modern women's standards specifically, women of the past were better at making decisions. You know, their standards were logical. Their standards was if he has a house, car, and money, and he comes from a good family, he was raised to be a good man, then that's all that you needed. And then from there, you and him work together and build up each other, right? Y'all influence each other by being together and loving each other. So what you bring to the table benefits him, what he brings to the table benefits you, and that's how it traditionally used to be, and that's how it had been working for thousands and thousands of years, and everybody lived happy ever after because it was a symbiotic relationship, not a situationship, like modern day stupidity, right? Situationships and you know, hypergamy, among other things, where it's like, nah, the guy I gotta be with got to be like the most rarest guy in the world. He has to be Superman in order to be with me, when you're not even Lois Lane. You're less than Lois Lane. You're the chick that, you know, makes coffee at Starbucks or something. Not throwing no shade at anybody who works at Starbucks, just saying, it's like some women like to think that they're Lois Lane, and the perfect guy for them is Superman. But not every man can be Superman, right? Just like not every woman is Lois Lane. So you gotta find your equivalent, right? What your version of Superman, not the Superman, right? 6 feet, 6-pack, 6 figures, superpowers, all that extra stuff, right? Get the best for you, not the best in the world, right? Stop chasing the guy who's the best in the world. That a lot of women in the world is like, yo, oh my God, he's amazing. Get the guy who's best for you. The perfect fit for you. Stop wanting what every other woman wants. Want what you, not want. Get what you need. Stop wanting things. Get what you need. What you need is more important than what you want. That's always been true. When we raise kids, we always raise them to understand that what they need is more important than what they want. Because usually what they want is not needed. It's unimportant. And usually after they get what they want, then they don't want it no more. It was more about the desire. It was more about they wanted it because they didn't have it. But once they have it, now they don't care about it no more because now they have it. Then they're just going to want something else. And that's just going to be an endless cycle of want. And that's what happens when, that happens to females as well. When they have standards, right? It's always wanting. They always want something. And they're probably not even getting it, so they complain because they're not getting what they want. But what they need is what's already available to them. On a daily basis, they're always getting what they need. There's always a great guy, coming into their lives, and instead of giving them a shot, instead of seeing where it leads to, they ignore it because they're focused on what they want. So they ignore everything else. You know what I mean? It's like wanting a very expensive purse or something, like a Birkin bag or something. You want it, but you don't need it, right? You might need the function of the Birkin bag because it's a bag, but there's tons of bags that already exist, and you probably have access to a lot of great-looking bags that have way better functions, way more capabilities, way better material than the Birkin bag, but you overlook all these great, better bags just because you want the Birkin. So you're ignoring all these great guys just because you want this guy that you think is great because he meets your standards, but don't realize that your standards are very superficial, right? They're very fictional, right? They're very exaggerated. Because like I said, on average, most guys aren't 6 feet, so wanting a guy who's 6 feet, and if you get lucky and find a guy who's 6 feet, that's very rare, but there's a high probability that that's not as special as you think it is, right? Any guy who's 6 feet, for example, just hypothetical, right? Because I don't know these guys like that, right? Hypothetically, could probably be all assholes. Every guy who's 6 feet, probably by default, is an asshole. You don't know. Oh, you would once you start dating them, right? Since that's what you want, and you start dating 6 feet guys, you'll find out if they're assholes or not. And from what I've heard, what I see on the internet, typically, that yeah, most women, when they do get what they want, typically it ends up quote unquote not being what they want. And it's like, okay, maybe you should lower your standards, but then they're stubborn and they're like, no, I'm not gonna lower my standards. Okay, the idea of standards is that it's supposed to change based off of your necessity. That's the idea of a standard. It's not supposed to be, a delusional, imaginary idea of what you want. Like, this is my ideal man. He meets these standards. It's like, well, that's imaginary. Your ideal man should be based off of reality. So you should look around your environment, right? Look at the guys around you and see, out of those guys, which ones have a lot of great qualities, and that should be your standard. Your standard should be based off of the quality of men that you have access to. It shouldn't be like, okay, every guy around me is 5'7", but I want a guy who's 7 feet tall. Like, what? But the average guy around you, or the average height around you, is 5'7". So why don't you look for a guy who is great, has a great personality, a great lifestyle, right? who you can definitely get along with that's 5'7" among the 5'7" guys that are around you, as an example. But instead you want this hypothetical, this imaginary guy who's great, but he's also 6 feet. Like, make that make sense. You know? Because the thing about, because here's the funny thing, right? Since most women's standards are, you know, more exaggerated, more materialistic, the likelihood of one guy having all those things is very rare. But other guys who don't meet all the requirements do meet some of the requirements. So you might have a guy who's 5'7", right? I'm like 5'11", 5'10", something like that. Between those two. So I'm almost 6 feet. But anyway, the thing is like, if a guy is 5'7", right, then, but he has 6-pack and he's a 6-figure earner, he has 2 out of the 3 of your standards. So you should give him a shot. But most women will disqualify him just because he's 5'7". It's like, nope, you're 5'7". Don't talk to me, even though he meets the other 2 of her standards. So that's the thing about the standards being wrong, is that either you ladies don't adhere to the standard 100%, or they don't adhere to the standards. What, that's it, right? Yeah, they either adhere to standards too much and it doesn't work out too well, or they don't adhere to it and they end up picking a guy that's extremely terrible. Like, they don't adhere enough to it. Like, for example, they want 6 figures, 6-pack, 6 foot, but it'll deal with, you know, a guy who's broke, who's I'll say 5'8" or something, because that's close to 6 feet, right? 5'8", so he kind of looks like he could be 6 feet, but he's 5'8", broke, and out of shape. So she'll mess with a guy like that, probably get pregnant by a guy like that, and I see that a lot on the internet, happen a lot on the internet, so that's a highly likely scenario. And it's like, if you actually adhered, if you were stubborn and adhered to your standard, you wouldn't have ended up in a scenario where you ended up getting pregnant by a guy that doesn't meet your standards at all. It's way less than your standards. So now you're dealing with a guy, and if he's broke, that means he makes bad financial decisions, because he's definitely not trying to make sure he's not broke. So, and now he got you pregnant. Yeah, him helping you with a child is going to be a no-go, right? It's going to be a not really possible type situation. And then you're just going to be butthurt and complaining, and then you're probably going to be like, there ain't no good men out here. But the thing is, you chose a man who wasn't good. It's not that there ain't no good men. You had a standard that should equal you know, ending up with a good man, but you ignored it. You ignored your standard and picked a guy that was far the opposite of your standards, and then that ended up failing. Not saying that if you pick a guy that's the opposite of your standards, that it's, you know, it's destined to fail or anything. I'm just saying that it's not too surprising that it did fail, considering the fact that if your standards was based off of logic, right, based off of your life experiences, then your standard should reflect that you making better decisions, right? Reflect that a guy who meets these standards is the best option for you. That's the whole idea of standards. That's why it's so weird when women talk about having standards, but these standards are not helping them in any shape, way, or form when it comes to relationship. When guys talk about them having, you know, certain wants and needs from women, they typically mess with women that give them the things they want and need, and those relationships tends to work out longer. They at least last longer until obviously her standards start kicking in, and then things start becoming problematic because, you know, because she was with a guy who was great, who was 5'8", who was, you know, slim, not muscular, but slim, and, you know, he makes decent money. He's close to 6 figures, so he's a great guy. But because her standards is 6 feet, 6 figures, 6-pack, once she sees a guy that, you know, kind of meets those criteria, suddenly she wants to ruin her good relationship because the guy that that meets her standards suddenly, appeared, and now she wants to upgrade, and then end up failing because more likely that guy is like, oh yeah, I'm not interested in a long-term relationship. And then bang. So you ruined a great thing for just to meet your standard, but the thing is you already had somebody who was great, which means that your standards wasn't perfect. And then when you end up getting with a guy that meets your standard, he ends up not being worthy of the standard, right? It's like, damn, this I'm not worthy, worth it. It's like, this wasn't even worth it. I got a guy who meets my standards, but he wasn't even worth it. The guy who didn't meet my standard was actually better. How did that work out, right? Well, because it's reality, What you want isn't always what you need. That's the point. That's why we call it wanting something. When you want something, yeah, of course. Most people want a Lamborghini, but do they deserve it? Can they handle it? They might, I use myself for example. It's like, yeah, I like the idea of having a Lamborghini, but I probably can't drive it very well. It's probably too fast. It probably handles in a way that, I'm not comfortable with. So it's like, yeah, I might like a Lamborghini, but I'm more likely not a Lamborghini type person. So I'm better off getting something else, something that, best suits me. Even if I want a Lamborghini, right? It's more logical for me to get what best suits me, what works best for me. So let's say hypothetically what works best for me is a Dodge Viper or something like that, a nice classical car, sports car, then okay, or a Ferrari, right? So if a Ferrari is better for me, then all right, then I'll get a Ferrari or a Tesla. I definitely want a Tesla, So it's like, yeah. So instead of getting the Lamborghini, which looks cool and all, the Tesla is more of my type, right? Especially if I don't like to drive, let the car drive me, right? The whole Knight Rider thing, yeah. Self-driving cars, right? So I definitely wanted to talk to me. That'd be awesome. But yeah, that's just the logic. It's like, because when I look at women and interact with women, I'm always looking for women that I get along with, that I make them laugh, they make me laugh, that we have a lot in common. We have stuff that ain't in common, which is nice because that that adds to the relationship, right? That adds to my life, being interacting with somebody who has different life experiences, so they bring something different. Just like the idea of dating somebody outside your culture, because they bring their culture to you, right? And you get to interact with you get to learn about their culture through them, and they learn about your culture through you, and you're interchanging all this cultural stuff, and just makes things more interesting, right? Spice up life, as they say. So these kind of things matter. I'm very partial to Japanese women, so I'm a Latin man, so these we're obviously going to have cultural differences that we can learn from each other, So that's why it's so ironic, the idea of women having standards, but then they don't perfectly adhere to it to try to reduce the probability of ending up. Because here's the thing: if you're going to end up accidentally getting pregnant, it would be better to get pregnant by a guy who meets their standards, right, ladies? Why get pregnant by a guy that don't meet your standards? I shouldn't be hearing stories and seeing women on the internet. And remember, this is from women themselves, posting on the internet and stuff like that, complaining about, oh, my baby daddy this, that, and the third. And then when you look, and then when you also see that she be talking about what her standard is, what her type of guy is like. Then why is your baby daddy the total opposite of your type? You say you're like, let's say, tall black men who play basketball or something similar to that, or just big tall black men who own businesses or something like that, or they're an IT guy. As long as they're black and they got a job, they meet your standard. Okay, whatever your standards is. But then you get with a short, chubby white guy or something, or an Asian guy who just so happens, who is good with computers. Like, okay, he's good with computers. You seem to like guys who's good with computers. That's cool and all, but he's not the type that you prefer, but you gave him a shot anyway. But then here's the thing. But then you regretted it. So you made a decision. It's the opposite of what the decision you normally would make, and then now you regret it. It's like, well, that's what happens when you don't adhere to your standards. Because the idea of your standards is that you already decided what you want before you start going out there to get it, right? And then that's another thing, is you want a guy who meets your standards, but you'll mess with all these guys that don't until you find the guy who meets your standards. But then the guy who meets your standards doesn't want you because you've been with all those guys that didn't meet your standards. To him, that's disrespectful. It's like, I'm the perfect guy for you, but you decided to be with these 30 plus guys prior to getting to me. And I'm supposed to be okay with that? Okay with you going through all these dudes before you get to me? And according to you, before you started being with those guys, I already met your standards. Like, you already had your standards. Your standard was me. You wanted a guy like me, but instead you were with all these other guys who were not like me until you got to me. But you want me to feel honored and special and feel like, I'm the one for you, but I'm actually the 31. I'm the 31st guy. Because you went through 30 guys before you got to me. I'm 31. When I should have been the one and only, but instead I'm 31. I don't feel special being the 31st guy. I would feel special being the first and only guy. Right? So that's why it's so weird about this whole standard thing, and why I'm like, standards are wrong. Because most people don't even adhere to your standards. Because the idea of a standard, right, is that it's essentially rules. It's like, it's the law. But women have no problem breaking their own laws. It's like, wait, you created your own laws, your own rules of the only guys you're going to quote unquote mess with, but then you start messing with a whole bunch of guys who don't meet your laws, right? Your rules. Which means you don't even respect your own rules. Which is strange. You created the standard. So why are you not listening to your own standards? That right there is a red flag for me. A woman having standards but then doesn't live up to it. I think I've had one of my exes where she says she don't date guys outside of her race, but she made an exception for me. Right? I think she was a black woman, so she typically dates black guys. So it's like, okay, you typically date black guys. Nothing wrong with that, but it's like, but you made an exception for me. That seems weird, considering the fact that it's not like you didn't have the option to date outside your race. You just chose to date your race, but right now you're making an exception for me. So what's so special about me that you'll make an exception? And the thing is that, are you sure that I'm worth it, right? If I'm worth changing your preference, I'm not saying that you can't try it, see if it'll work, if it works out. But the thing is, it's not guaranteed. So it's like, again, hey, to each their own. Give it a try, see how it works out. And I was open to the idea, like, okay, you want to give this a try, all right, give it a try. See how it works out. See if we work out, right? And all my exes, they're all awesome. But, I have standards. Yes, ladies, I have standards. So a lot of them, these ladies, as great as they were, they're good women. That's what I'm saying. They're good women. But, I have certain standards, and they only met some of them, not all of them. So it's like, I'm very picky. Therefore, it's like, unfortunately, even though y'all really good quality women, you're still not up there to what I'm looking for. So, we gave it a try. We try to see how it works out. See if we grow together. If we improve together. But most of the women that I've dated, their goals in life were a lot lower than my goals. My goals were a lot higher, and it's not a problem for them to have low goals. Like they don't expect to like live a big lavish lifestyle, but the irony is that most of them just didn't want to be involved in a lavish lifestyle. It's like, that's unfortunate because that's the kind of life that I want. I want to, I want all the cool stuff, right? I want to be able to travel the world and, have fun. I want to make the world a better place, obviously, among other things. But it's like I want to live a certain type of life, and most of these women are not interested in that type of life. Ironically, one of my exes, she wanted to live in an apartment with cats. But I noticed in that description that she didn't mention me in it. She was just talking about that she wants an apartment. She wants to have a whole bunch of cats, and it's like, okay, I noticed I'm not mentioned at all in that scenario. And then on top of this, like, why an apartment when we can afford better? Why not a nice big house? And yeah, you can have cats. You're taking care of them, not me, but right. But like you can have a big house, a lot, cats. Okay, I can work with that. See, I'm willing to to work with what she wants, but she kept going back to the idea like, nah, just an apartment, cats. And I pointed out to her, there's like, but you notice you don't mention me in it. You don't even mention the idea of being in a relationship with somebody in that apartment with cats. You just keep talking about that that's what you want. That you see your future being you with cats in an apartment. That sounds like the path, a pre-planned path of being a cat lady, being alone with cats in an apartment. If that's your destiny, then if that's what you choose to, if that's the life you're choosing, then that's the path you're choosing. But then, what's the point of us being in a relationship if you're just going to end up alone with cats in an apartment? And you're doing this while you're in your 20s. Think about it. You're in your 20s already planning to be a cat lady. You can, hey, the choice is yours, but that's unfortunate. But ironically, I had to let the relationship go. I saw that she was interested in another guy, so I definitely encouraged her to get with that other guy. They did. She got pregnant, and she has a beautiful daughter. And I haven't heard much from her ever since then. She had a job, of course, at the time. She got a job doing something with computers because when we met, we were training to do computer, IT stuff. So that was a thing. So last I heard, she's doing good. Hopefully she's doing great, but that's about it. So, again, your standards need to either be adhered to, or you need to change them so they're more reasonable, so that way one, guys can meet them, and two, you can be happy, because it makes no sense to have standards that keep you sad. Just like in that little story there, I just said the whole idea of like having an apartment with cats and being alone essentially. And she didn't even realize that she kept referring to the situation. She kept describing the situation of her with the cats in the apartment, not her and me and the cats, or her and a man and the cats, or her and a man and children and the cats. Like, notice that she didn't add those extra details. It was just her, cats, and apartment. That's how she saw her future. But as you can see, when I continue the story, she did things different. If I'm right, she did get an apartment. I don't think she got cats, not that I know of anyway, but she definitely has a kid, right? So that's a thing. So you notice that her future actually ended up being different than she wanted it to be. But that's the irony of the fact that, like, you have a standard, but you didn't really adhere to the standard 100%, as well as, how odd it was to to even have the idea of that type of standard. Like, she should have had, she should have wanted more, is what I'm saying. Like, her standard was lower than what you expect, right? But but in a way you can say her standards was lower, but she was getting guys, or at least getting scenarios where the which are higher than her standard. So she was getting more than she wanted. Like, she wanted less, but she was getting more because she was in a relationship with me. Then she ended up with another guy, right? Ended up having a kid. Hopefully she's living a good life right now, right? Living a better life than she originally planned to. So we hope for the best. I mean, it'd be unfortunate that in the near, in the by now, because this was many years ago, like over 10 years ago. So it'd be unfortunate now that she is in an apartment alone with cats. Like, woo! Well, at least you're living to your standards, because apparently that was your standard. That's what you expected it for your life, and you met it. So I give you credit for living up to your standard, as it were. But I just would like it if her standards were higher. But like I said, most women's standards are too high that it don't even make sense, because usually they can't reach it. And a lot of times they make exceptions to that rule, to their standards. They tend to pick guys that usually are not good guys, and then complain that all guys ain't shit. But it's actually only the guys that you mess with. They clearly weren't shit. It was obvious that they weren't shit. Other guys around you told you they weren't shit, but you didn't listen to them. Other females told you the guy wasn't shit, but you still didn't listen. Your own family told you the guy wasn't shit, but you still didn't listen to them. And then, shit happens, right? As they say. So that's why it's important that it's like, if you're going to have standards, live up to them. If you're not getting the results you want, even though you have these quote-unquote high standards, which is supposed to mean that they're high quality, that these standards are super amazing, they're the best standards ever, that a lot of people should be able to meet those standards, and those are the people you're only going to mess with, right? Because like I said before, it's like, I got standards, but my standards are reasonable. My standards are created so a large majority of women have the option, they have a chance of being able to get in a relationship with me and see how it works out, because they meet some criteria that's like, okay, you meet these criteria, and these are okay, I'll put it this way, my standards is basically the bare minimum, but then of course I have another level to that of like ideally what I'm looking for. Just like women want 6 figures, 6 packs, this and that. I have a version of that, but I have another standard which is below that, right? Which is the entry level standard. Ideally, I want this perfect, woman, but I do have the entry level standard where it's like, okay, if you meet these criteria, I'll give you a shot, right? If you meet these criteria, I'll talk to you, I'll get to know you, and see if maybe, you can either A, already capable of meeting my higher standards, or B, you can level up to my standards. That's another thing. Most women don't even let guys try to level up. When it comes to height, that's hard to fix. For now, until we do some genetic stuff, right, and start making 6 feet tall, men, through genetics on purpose. But until then, it's like you gotta take what you can get. Because if guys can choose to be 6 feet, because women want 6 feet, guys would be 6 feet on purpose. Right? They'll do what it takes to get there, but that's not something they can control. When it comes to fitness, when it comes to finance, those are things guys can fix. Notice that all those 3 words I just used start with the letter F: fitness, finance, and fix. But height starts with an H, and height is not something you can fix. Get it? So, that's why guys don't make a big deal about women's height. Whether the woman's short or tall, we can work with it, because as long as you have everything else, right? You're fit, you're friendly, you can fit, right? You can fit into his life. So I want you ladies to do good. I want you ladies to get, your happy ending, right? You know, get your Prince Charming, because not every guy is the right guy. Mr. Right, the right guy for you, is rare. The right guy for you is out there. You just gotta find him. And no, you don't find him by test driving every guy you meet until you find the right guy. You know, yes, talk to every guy. A guy says hi to you, talks to you. You know, unless you're in a hurry to go somewhere, you know, give him a couple minutes of your time, you know, to try to get to know him. Ask him questions. That's the main thing. Is most women don't ask questions. Most women don't try to get to know a guy in, you know, in a few seconds, you know, in a few minutes, to see if it's worth, you know, pursuing anything. They just look at a guy as like, doesn't meet my standards. I'm gonna keep walking. I'm gonna ignore him. Don't even give the guy a chance to prove if A, he is awesome, or B, he's a piece of shit. Instead, you'll ignore a lot of guys, and then you see a guy that you do like. You're like, oh, he looks like what I want. And then you go to him, you try to get him, and then it turns out he's a piece of shit. Then you're like, damn, he was a piece of shit. Like, that can happen. But if you at least was nice to every other guy around you, you might have found a great guy among them. A great guy for you, not a great guy in general. One of the annoying things about the women's standards, having high standards, is that all your standards tend to be the same. Y'all all want the same type of guy, but that type of guy barely exists. So that's why it is weird to want the same type of guy. Essentially, what women want is Superman, Clark Kent. They want that guy. But that guy is not infinite. There's not a million copies of that guy to go around. So it makes no sense to be like, oh, I want that guy. That guy is what I like. I like him. I want him. And it's like, but not every guy is the same. Just like a lot of women have iPhones, right? Why don't you have different types of phones? Why aren't y'all individuals when it comes to owning a phone? Instead, y'all have all the same exact phone. It's because y'all want what everybody else wants, because that's the feminine mindset is, I want what every other woman wants. Instead of wanting or accepting what works best for you, what you need. If you need a guy to be loyal, respectful, honest, strong, caring, not emotional, none of that nonsense, but caring, like he cares about you and your emotions. You know, he pays attention to your emotions, and he knows how to deal with it, and vice versa, and all that stuff. That kind of stuff. A guy who can help you control your emotions is what you want, not a guy who is emotional. That when you cry, he cries. That don't make no effing sense. You want a man that can make you stop crying. You want a man that can make you stop feeling sad, feeling fear. You want a guy that when you're afraid, he can make you feel safe. That's what you want. You want a guy who can help you control your emotions, which is why a man has to know how to control his own emotions, so that way he can help other people control their emotions. You know, think about it. Whenever a child is scared, you feel like you want to make them feel safe. Or when a child is sad, you want to help make them happy. It's ironic that we do that for children, but we don't do that for each other. That's the irony. We don't do that for each other. Women nowadays are like, no, men need to be more emotionally intelligent, blah blah blah. Like, if that makes sense, it's like, no, emotion and intelligence don't go together. That's a contradiction. That's like mixing water and oil together, and thinking that works, thinking that that's a good drinkable solution. It's like, no, don't drink water and oil together. No, that's a bad idea. Just like mixing emotion with logic intelligence is a bad idea. So you definitely want to make sure that you're in a relationship with somebody who can understand your emotions, right? Can understand who you are, who can, make you happy when you're sad, right? Among other things, and then go from there. Whoever you agree to marry, he needs to be the best guy. He can't just be good in, he needs to be the best guy for you. can't just be like, oh, well, he met my standards, that's good enough, you know, even though he's an asshole, or he's self-absorbed, or toxic, or all these narcissistic, all these words that women like saying out here, misogynistic, sexist, blah blah blah. It's like, oh, well, I mean, your standards didn't exclude assholes. You're looking for a guy who's 6 feet, 6 figures, 6-pack. That doesn't automatically mean he's not an asshole. If anything, assholes tend to be people who think they're better than everybody else. And a guy who's 6 feet, 6 figures, and 6-pack, there's a high probability he thinks he's better than everybody else. Because in many ways, he is. He's taller. He's in better shape. He got more money than most people. So yeah, he's gonna be an asshole. More likely than not. But that's what you want. Women love assholes, apparently. So, you know, choose your destiny, but hopefully you choose a better one. And hopefully you improve your standards for your benefit. I'm not saying improve your standards so I have a shot at you, you know, because some women like to think that when, you know, guys in general point out the fact that, ladies, your standards are too high, you know, are unreasonable. Most guys can't meet it. Why don't you lower it? Like, why should I? I'm not going to lower my standards. I'm not going to give these losers out here, these guys out here, they ain't worth my time, blah, 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 blah. Not realizing that the best guys for them would be the guys that they think aren't worthy of them. They ain't worth their time, but they are the right guys for them. Because most women think they're better than they really are. And that sounds like narcissism to me. Where you think you're better instead of actually being better. Because if you were better, there'll be tons of people that'll be wanting to be with you, right? You would meet a lot of people's standards if you were better in many ways. But that's for a different conversation. And that's the end of the podcast.